Welcome, Robin.
All right. Thank you, Frank. And thank you to Kazoo and Patrick and Michael as well. Before I begin, I just want to say one of the greatest things about being in the field is I think a group like Kazoo, what I've always appreciated about them is they have the conviction to act on their own. They don't need to follow anybody. They don't need to be followed. And I think it's just a great group to have on our side in the longevity field. So thank you to you guys. Also, Eric Berden gave a really cool talk yesterday about the immune system and senescence. He's actually one of our advisors. I didn't pay him to give that talk. It just happened to be really very much in line with what we do. So I'm going to really build on what he said yesterday and talk to you guys about how when you harness the immune system for removing senescent cells, you have a massive impact on disease. So that's the talk. Also, I recognize that it's early on a Saturday, and some of us may be jet lagged. And so I'm just going to hit you guys with some really heavy technical statements right away. So just bear with me. Okay. So these are the key takeaways. This is the cheat sheet for the entire talk. So just boom. Immune system, very important. We would not be here today without that. So the thing about the immune system is actually it peaks in its effectiveness in your 20s. Anyone here still in your 20s? Okay, good. Okay, I don't believe you, but okay. All right. All right, playa, I see you. Biologically, emotionally, fine. But what I want to get to is actually restoration, responsible restoration of immune function, I think is one of the best ways we can work on health span. So just think about first principles. The immune system is important. Making it youthful again, restoring it in a responsible way, I think is one of the most natural, important ways we can think about the longevity field. So that's what we do. Okay, so more specifically on the work that Deciduous is doing. First, I'm going to talk about senescence removal, called senolysis, and what I think a revolution in the field can look like. Two, I'm going to talk about how the accumulation of senescent cells is driven by a failing or slowing down immune system. Three, I'm going to talk about how we figured out which part of the immune system actually can recognize and remove senescent cells, not just in one disease, but in multiple different diseases. Four, I'm going to talk about does it actually matter? So first 3 points are interesting, maybe. Academically, certainly we'll get you a paper. But four is where translation happens. So can you show data that quantitatively suggests that what you are doing is actually important and can translate into a clinical outcome that's really relevant for a lot of people? And lastly, I'll talk about the next steps in our program. Okay. So one, the TPP for senolysis. Having been in the biotech field for really my entire career, I've always been trained to think about revolutions and not evolutions. I think evolutions can give you a good LinkedIn post or a good paper, or you can be the king of the world for a week or a couple weeks or maybe a couple years. But to me, I'm always thinking about when you build a program, can it revolutionize a field? And so I'm going to talk about what that looks like first. So in my opinion, this is what, if you wanted to revolutionize the senescence field, this is what I believe you would have to achieve. So first, intermittent dosing. And the reason for intermittent dosing is one, who wants to take so many pills or so many treatments every day? Wouldn't it be nice if you could just have a maintenance of the effect that you had to periodically administer every couple months or every year, rather than trying to take all these different doses of different drugs every single day? Also, when you think about the work that we're doing, we obviously care about the financials and the business aspect, but we really want to develop something that can impact the entire world. And so it's for everybody, not just for the people at the very top. Specificity to pathological cells. So Marco gave a great talk from Rejuvenation yesterday about, one of the first generation problems with senescence is that the senolytics that people have been employing initially have a lot of off-target effects. And a lot of them are actually reformatted cancer drugs, so it's not surprising that they have off-target effects. But what you really need to revolutionize, in my opinion, is a really specific ability to actually recognize and remove senescent cells only that are pathological and leave the rest of the healthy cells alone. Three, I think, is really important because I think in the longevity field, sometimes we get confused about being the best in class for our space versus best in class for a disease. And I think you have to be both. So you can't just have the best senescence program. But as I'll talk to you about today, in pulmonary fibrosis and metabolic disease, you also have to be the best as far as those medicines. So it's not just about a great senescence program, it's about, are you the best IPF drug, period? Are you the best metabolic drug, period? That's what you need. Safety, obvious, right? So we talk a lot about the cancer context, and cancer has different tolerability for safety because this patient's such a dire need. But in my opinion, you have to have a very safe drug. If you think about longevity, about aging, about health span, safety is critical here. And then of course, I think the value prop here really centers around, is it systemic? Can you get multi-indication efficacy? And what I mean by that is, as you age, your risk of having multiple diseases goes up significantly. Wouldn't it be nice to have a single drug that actually could treat multiple things systemically at once instead of taking multiple drugs to treat multiple things? Okay. That to me is a revolution. So no big deal if you can do that. I think you've done a good job. Okay. All right, so a little bit on the immune system. So first on senescence, these cells are irreversibly damaged cells. They go into permanent cell cycle arrest. It can be caused by injury, diet, age, glucose, telomere shortening, et cetera. But over time, these cells start to express what's called the SASP, so this is the senescence-associated secretory phenotype. And really what it's trying to do from an evolutionary perspective, these cells are saying, hey, look at me, I'm inflammatory, immune system, come and remove me, come and take me out, because something's gone wrong here, I need to go, I need to be removed. Unfortunately, as you age and with disease, the immune function behind this starts to fail. And when it fails, the cells go, look, you're not going to remove me, and through the paracrine mechanism, they start to make other cells in the microenvironment also become senescent. And so that's how you get progressive destruction of tissues. That's how these things spread over time. So over a period of time, you get inflammation. I love all these cameras, by the way. Thank you. Fibrosis and stem cell exhaustion. These are indications you can go after for senescence. These are all places where in the literature it's been shown that removing senescent cells with our approach or other approaches have been impactful in resolving disease. There's also indications if you look at human tissue samples where it's believed that senescent cells are actually causal to driving those diseases, not just an innocent bystander, but actually causal in driving human disease. So big market opportunities for the senescence space. Okay, so how do we do this? And I'll get on to the data after that. We wanted to understand, like I said, the revolution is always what we think about. So what we did is we took senescent cells from very non-adjacent disease classes. So pulmonary tissue, adipose tissue, diabetic tissue, T1D tissue, and we sequenced them and we looked at what is different about a senescent cell from disease tissue versus a normal cell. And long story short, there's not nearly enough time to go into the paper, but if you want to read the paper, it's right there. We published it a few years ago. It talks about how we basically used all the clues from single cell analysis to understand how the immune system actually interacts with senescent cells in a normal way. And it turns out that natural killer T cells, which have been an often ignored or mispositioned T cell group, often positioned towards cancer, actually have a really great endogenous ability to remove senescent cells very effectively with a single dose, as I'll show you. Okay. So just in a time scale, so when you're young and you're healthy, disease-free, your immune system's very effective. You don't have much, you do get senescent cells, but your immune system is really good at removing them. But over time, what happens is that function slows down. And so all we're doing here is a transient activation of the NKT cells. It lasts for about a week, and that removes senescent cells, and that treats disease. Okay. So now let's talk about the data. So does any of this actually translate into something we can put into the clinic? Okay. So first, proof of concept I want to show you is in lung fibrosis. This is a bleomycin-induced model. We give a pretty heavy dose of bleomycin. The bleomycin will give the mice senescence, inflammation, and fibrosis in the lung. And it's a pretty quick model in the mouse, but by day 10, the disease actually started to plateau in the mouse. The induction's quite quick. By day 10, you have plateau of disease. And so at day 10, what we do is we give one single dose of our drug. And the first thing we want to look at is, did we actually expand the NKT cells? And did we remove the senescent cells? So is the mechanism intact? So from left to right, the NKT cells are on the y-axis. The treatment groups are down below, so the black is the control. The green are just the injured mice, and then the Bleo 32580 is our drug. That's the one we made. And so you see the NKT cells are now restimulated in the lung, and as a result of that, the senescent cells are back down very close to baseline levels. So NKT cells go up, they do their endogenous ability, they remove senescent cells. Now, does it translate into something clinically that would be interesting? Okay, so again, single dose on day 10, day 14, you see the mechanism working, and by day 21, we take down the animals and look at them and say, did we remove fibrosis or not? And the first thing we look at are a couple endpoints from the BALFs. This is the fluid from the lungs. And TNF-alpha returns to homeostasis. IL-17A is another cytokine, also attenuates. And the reason we look at these is because these two cytokines are actually fibrotic cytokines. So if they go down, you expect the following, which is a really nice reduction in lung fibrosis. So single dose, you see about, in this study, about a 70% reduction in fibrosis. So really quite significant. Okay. And then in a different model, in a different study, we did one lung fibrosis. This is supported. We did one called PSR, so picoserous red. This looks at collagen depositions. You see, even with a large number of animals, really nice reduction in the collagen content in these animals. And if you want to see a picture, I'll show you a picture as well. So when you slice up the mice and look at the actual tissue, on the left you have the control. In the middle are the injured animals with no treatment. And then this is what you can get back closer towards baseline with a single dose. So you see basically the surface area of the picoserous red is greatly reduced in the treatment group. Okay. We also did a head-to-head study. So we took nintedanib, which is the current standard of care. 60 milligrams per kilogram is the human equivalent dose for a mouse. So we gave 60 mg per kg. We actually gave 10 doses of nintedanib to see how many doses would it take to see if we can get anything close to what we can do. Turns out even if you give 10 doses of nintedanib at the human equivalent dose, it's still less effective than our approach in terms of reducing fibrosis in these animals. So just gives you a sense, the nintedanib is worth about $3 billion per year in sales. It's a tyrosine kinase inhibitor. Unfortunately, you have to give it at a really, really high toxic dose to show any impact on fibrosis. So it is in the literature is sometimes people mention anti-fibrotic capabilities, but the dose you have to give it at to actually get those anti-fibrotic capabilities is actually really high and actually quite above the maximum tolerable dose. So these drugs actually have some impact on survival, but actually have very little impact on fibrosis. Okay. And then we also looked at a high-fat diet model, so diabetes. We give these mice high-fat diets. It's a Western diet for about 4 months. They become obese. They have senescence developing in the adipose tissue. A1C levels go up. And so at day 120, so a 4-month model, one single dose of the drug, again, the NKT cells in the high-fat diet group, the HFD group, have gone up. The standard group and the vehicle groups are, as you see, quite low. And then you see, again, a nice reduction in the senescent cells. And then, again, the question we always ask is quantitatively, can you measure how much it matters? So in the follow-up, we go, look, 10 days post-dose, and we see that the insulin resistance has come down quite significantly. The glucose tolerance has also improved. So when you give the mice a glucose challenge, you see that the glucose levels don't spike nearly as high as the untreated animals. So the untreated animals are in the green, and when you give them the glucose, huge glucose spike. When you give our treated animals the glucose challenge, you see that their blood glucose levels can be managed much more effectively, almost as well as a normal healthy mouse. Okay. And what was really cool is on the back, and we looked at A1C levels. So HbA1c is one of the best indicators for diabetic health and improvements. It's a very stable indicator. It doesn't change very quickly. So if you're really getting a sustained improvement in diabetes, eventually over time you'll see the A1C levels start to go down. So in this study, again, single dose at day 120, and we looked at a month out, and we looked again at 2 months out. And this is the data. So we see the green are the HFD animals, so you see the A1C levels continue to go up. They stay on the diet, so you expect them to go up. The black are the control animals, so they're not on any diet, any special diet. They just on a normal diet. They stay stable. But the high-fat diet animals we've treated, you see the A1C levels go down consistently over a 2-month period while they actually remain on the diet the entire time. So we're seeing that we can actually improve the A1C levels while the mice continue to be on this high-fat diet. So it's a really nice way to think about what the future could look like, just these maintenance treatments for metabolic health. Okay, so what's the value prop here? Single dose efficacy, so everything I showed you was driven by one single dose of the drug. 2, it's systemic, so I talked in the beginning about, I think you need something like, as we age, it's unlikely you're gonna have one disease, you're probably gonna have a couple, or it'd be a risk for several. So it's a systemic approach to senescence removal. It's a natural mechanism, so when I talked about the beginning, I think it's important to understand nature and how things were intended to happen via our immune system. And so this is a natural mechanism for removing senescent cells. Good precedent for safety, so not just with this class of drugs, but even in our safety studies, we've shown that up to 30 times the effective dose, we don't see any untoward effects in the animals. It's robust, so it didn't matter in this case that I showed you if we induce senescence with injuries, like in the bleomycin model, or with long-term diets, but this approach worked on both quite well. Really specifically targetable, so the NKT cells we go after, there's a way to target them very specifically, so the off-target effects are mitigated. And then really attractive cost of goods. So I talked in the beginning about this approach really should be for everybody, and it should be intermittent. So the idea that, even in IPF, the current standard of care right now, payers will put up about $100,000 per patient per year. We think we can do better and give fewer doses with a less expensive therapy. Okay. So in summary, failed immune clearance leads to the accumulation of senescent cells. NKT cells can be harnessed to remove senescent cells, and a single dose of our drug expands NKT cells, reduces senescent cells, and treats both metabolic and fibrotic diseases, and no adverse events in our first safety study up to 30 times the effective dose. Okay. Next steps for us, scaling up the lead molecule, running IND-enabling studies, and we're also extending the platform, so not just type 2 diabetes and IPF, but looking at other metabolic indications. We also have a new program, which I didn't talk about today, but happy to share more information about offline, where we've now taken the similar idea where we sequenced, the tissue from the periphery. We now sequenced some tissue from the brain and understood now how senescent cells in the immune system in the brain interact, which is different than NKTs, and understood now how that can be harnessed to restore the immune system from the brain to clear senescent cells for neurological disorders. That's our newer program we're working on. Just a couple of our investors are listed below. You may recognize a lot of these names. Thomas was the former CEO of Novartis, and Jeff Dean just joined recently. He's a CSO at Alphabet. Also have some really great non-dilutive sponsorships from AbbVie and Eisai, who are familiar with our program and have provided some support to our lab in San Francisco. That's it. If you are a scientist or you are aggressively unemployed postdoc, or what have you, and you're looking for your next thing in your career, please come and talk to me. We're looking to hire immunologists or people with experience in the metabolic or fibrotic space. Or if you're interested in joining our investor group, please come and find me. This is what I look like, so I'll be around. Or just send me an email, and I'll be happy to get back to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.